welcome to this week's edition of the Pete Mezzetti Show. My guest tonight is Old Saybrook Superintendent of Schools, Jan Perruccio. Jan, welcome. How are you?
I'm very well, Pete. How are you?
Good. I'm good, thanks.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year as well.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about who is Jan Perruccio and how long she's been with the Old Saybrook as Superintendent of Schools.
I have been superintendent in Old Saybrook for 2.5 years now.
All right.
I'm happy to report. Yeah,
All
and
right.
prior to that, I was an assistant superintendent and a high school principal, an assistant principal, and a high school teacher for many years. So
Really?
came up through the ranks, touched all the bases,
All
and
right.
enjoy doing what I'm doing.
All right. So what did you teach when you taught?
High school English.
Ooh,
Yeah,
fun.
yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a great job. I always say if I ever had to go back to teaching, I'd be perfectly happy. It was just the best time.
I was
13
gonna
years
say-
of good stuff.
I was going to say teaching English.
Yeah.
Always got to be fun.
It is.
So as far as the Old Saybrook school system goes, you guys are about to begin or probably just beginning the budget process.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if maybe we can talk a little bit about the process and how it starts and where it goes.
Well, I think like in most districts, the budget process actually starts as early as October, and it doesn't end until May.
Right.
So it really encompasses the majority of the year. And we start in October with meetings with principals, and principals meet with teachers and bring all of the requests back to central office.
Oh,
we
yeah.
look at our expenses and our vendors and start to look at places where we are supporting projects and need to put some resources, and places where we can perhaps make some savings. And that process doesn't go live. It doesn't
No.
go out of our offices until about the end of December. So
Okay.
now the Board of Education has the superintendent's budget. The Budget and Fiscal Committee of the Board of Education will continue to meet and refine the budget, and we'll come out and present, we'll have it to the town around the beginning of March. And then all the live conversations with community members
Oh, yeah.
really start to take place at that point. Although, of course, at any time, community members can come to the board and hear about the budget at that level, too.
Exactly. And obviously you have how big is the Board of how big is your Board of Education in
We have,
Saybrook?
how many? We have
How many
nine.
members? Okay.
Nine
Nine?
on the board, yep. And the Budget and Fiscal is a subcommittee of that, and
Okay.
they do a lot of work with budget. At the end of the day, it'll come out in the spring as the
Yeah.
Board of Education's budget, which may be higher dollar amount, a lower dollar amount, or exactly the same as the one the superintendent presented.
Exactly. And I talked to, you and I have a mutual friend as far as superintendents go. That would be Jack Cross from
Yeah.
the town of Clinton.
Yeah.
And Jack and I talked about, when we were here, when Jack was on with me not long ago, we talked about budgets and all that other fun stuff. And I asked him a question that I'm going to ask you as well. How much fun is it to figure out if you have to cancel school on a snow day?
It's the worst thing at all you have to do. What happens on those days is you go to bed at 11 o'clock and you wake up at 2:30 or 3 o'clock.
Right.
That's more complicated than putting a budget together. And you're usually wrong no matter what decision you make. I'm sure he told you the same thing, right?
Of course he did.
You just can't tell the New England weather.
No, of course not. Now let me just ask you as a follow up as far as that goes. How do you I guess gauge or figure out, okay, I'm going to cancel school. Okay, there's going to be a 2-hour delay. The delay thing. How do you figure out?
There's no magic to it. I think people think that superintendents have like this special weather fairy who tells them what to do.
Yeah.
We actually talk to each other a lot, and we find out what road conditions are like in some of the towns around us.
Okay.
We talk to our public works.
Right, okay.
I call the police dispatcher in the morning in Saybrook and ask what they can tell me, and their sergeant on the road will tell them what road conditions are like. And then my ace in the hole is our bus company, and the person at the bus depot will sometimes either drive in her car or drive in a bus on
Right,
the roads to
and
see
how
how
they
the
are.
conditions are. You take all those things into consideration, then you look at the weather reports and what's coming up and how cold or how warm it's supposed to get, and you make the decision. At some point, you just make the decision and you make the
Exactly.
call, and then everybody gets to hear my lovely voice at like 6 in the morning or before that, telling them either it's a 2-hour delay or stay home.
That's probably not a bad call.
No, I think they don't mind the stay home. I think
No.
the 2-hour delay just makes people's lives even harder.
Exactly. Because if you do a 2-hour delay, then you got to downscale your lesson plan a little and try
For
to figure
teachers,
out. Right.
parents have to worry about childcare if they have to
Exactly.
go to work. So it gets complicated.
It does.
But you got to make the decision based on safety.
It does. Speaking of plans, we have a strategic plan in the town of Old
We
Saybrook.
have a strategic plan coming.
Should we talk about it?
I would love to talk
All
about
right.
it.
Well, then let's go.
So we already have a strategic plan in place.
yeah.
About 6 years ago now, the community got together and put together a strategic plan with 7 strategies to work on for 5 years.
Okay.
And we have collectively been working on those things. That was a really big undertaking because they hadn't really done a full-blown strategic plan, at least not in the recent history. They created a mission statement out of it, the 7 strategies with goals and action steps for each one. And now we're just sort of recreating a new strategic plan, working off of the old one, but also bringing in some new ideas and new concepts to keep up with the times.
Sure.
And we're just embarking on that. We just got started with it and interviewed some groups to see who was going to do the facilitation, and now the work begins. We got to roll up our sleeves and get started.
And I was going to say, the work begins. I was wondering maybe we can get into a little bit. I see a couple points here on just by looking at some notes. I was wondering if maybe we can get into a couple points and maybe get into detail about each talking point.
Sure. Yeah. A strategic plan is really, I find it to be a comfort as a leader of a district because it gives you a roadmap.
Right.
And so when you're making decisions, you like say whether or not you're going to support something financially, you look at the strategic plan, you say, how does this bring our strategic plan forward? How does it support us and what we're trying to do?
Right.
And a strategic plan, if it's carefully created, can be a wonderful tool for making those decisions. It focuses resources, and that can be very powerful too. And it helps us as the leaders of the district are trying to move either programs forward or make decisions about what has to occur for us to be able to move programs forward. We look to our strategic plan to help us with that decision making. Whether or not the committee, the strategic planning group, engages in a full-blown recreation of the mission statement or any of those things, that will depend on what the committee looks like once everybody starts to work on the project. It also, while you are creating a strategic plan, it gives you an opportunity to draw the community together, because part of the process will be bringing stakeholders together in focus groups, surveying stakeholders, and that would mean parents and students, staff, community members, administrators and Board of Education, and getting a lot of input about their sense of the direction of things, what the state of things are now, and where we could be moving towards. And at the end of the day, bringing all the stakeholders together is always a very valuable experience. We come out on the other end of it richer for it.
Right, exactly. And as far as what are some of the other, let's talk what is the process for creating the strategic plan, which we talked about but maybe we can get into a little bit more detail.
Well, we'll start by looking at our current strategic plan.
Sure.
So, and what's there, and what have we accomplished? So every year since the strategic plan was created, there have been yearly updates, at least yearly. Sometimes in the past few years, there have been semi-annual reports to the board about what we've done, how we've improved, how we've moved towards completion of action steps.
Okay.
And we'll look at what's left to do and whether or not it's still relevant, or if things have changed that much, and education's changing swiftly these days. So if things have changed so much that it's no longer relevant, what we want to abandon, what we want to move forward. And at that point, because we hired a firm to do the work, to do the facilitating, which I think is a good idea, they will conduct surveys, they'll run the stakeholder groups, they'll meet with the different groups, and at the end of the day, we will come up with specific action steps that will be done primarily by staff members, administrators, and staff members in the school to complete over the next 5 years.
Actually, that was going to be my next question. Who facilitates the program?
So we, as I said, we interviewed more than one firm, but we ended up going with Mezzetti, which is New England School Demographics, I want to say.
All right.
And they are going to do all of the initial work with the stakeholders. They'll create the survey questions based on what they learn in stakeholder groups, focus groups. And that's a really important thing because that gives it a level of objectivity.
Okay.
It removes it from being just controlled within the schools. And I think that lends a certain amount of credibility and allows us to kind of reflect on what gets presented to us by someone who's somewhat from the outside.
Now, who in the community is invited to get involved in the process?
Almost anybody can be involved in the process at some level, whether it's just being involved in taking a survey, or they're actually asked to be part of a focus group. Everybody has an opportunity to be involved. So we'll reach out to community members who don't necessarily have a lot to do with the schools, but we'll still give them an opportunity at least to participate in one way or the other. And by the way, NESDEC is New England School Development Council. I want to get the name right since we're on TV.
I was going to say, you looked it up somewhere, didn't you?
I did. I wrote it down because I knew I'd forget it.
That's okay. And as far as I guess, how long does the process take?
Oh, it'll take, just to get the plan done, it started this month, and it will take into May or maybe June.
Okay.
Just to get that far along. And then, of course, the action steps will take us 5 years.
Right, because it's a 5-year plan.
Right, and it will guide our decisions in that way for 5 years.
Now, over how many years will the district implement the plan?
5.
5.
It'll be 5, yeah.
Obviously.
Yep. Yeah, but that's a good question because it's 5, but not necessarily. It could move on beyond that. So I think there's some elements of our current strategic plan that will probably move forward with the new strategic plan. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, we're saying that whatever that is that we were working on, we didn't finish for one reason or another. There certainly were lots of initiatives that came from the state and other places in the last 5 years. So something's kind of got backburnered. We may be able to bring those forward and move them forward into the next 5, and who knows, perhaps even beyond as we grow.
Now, what is you said there? You have a current strategic plan, and then you have the 5-year plan, right?
It's the same thing. Yep.
I was going to say, is there a difference between each plan?
No, the current strategic plan was a 5-year plan, and it's coming to its end in June of this year.
Yeah.
And then this new plan will take over in July of this year and move us forward to the next 5.
I was going to say, because it's probably going to run the fiscal year.
It will run the fiscal year, but that's more of a luck of the draw than anything. We just so happened that we started our process in the second half of this year. Ideally, you time the new action steps to start with the academic year. So we'll probably create steps for academic year 1, and we'll work on those from September to June of 2016-17, and continue on that way.
Jan Perruccio, would you mind sticking around for another segment?
Not at all.
We'll be right back.
Okay, great.
Maybe he's really focused.
Hey, Michael. Maybe he likes spinning the wheels.
Maybe he just loves trucks.
Maybe he's just being a boy.
Preoccupation with objects is one early sign of autism. Learn the others today. The sooner it's diagnosed, the better.
And welcome back to this week's edition of the Pete Mezzetti Show. My guest is Jan Perruccio, who's the superintendent of schools for the town of Old Saybrook. Jan, welcome back.
Thank you.
No problem. So during the first segment, we started talking about the strategic plan, and I was just wondering, what do you as a superintendent hope to come of the strategic plan work in the process?
Well, as I said earlier, I'm a really big believer in strategic planning. It can get down to the nitty-gritty details over the next 5 years. And what will happen to sort of flesh out what the next 5 years will look like? Very often, and we're a small district, so very often we will involve most of our staff members in the process over the 5-year period. They'll form committees. Some of them will be chaired by administrators. Some may be chaired by teachers. Board members may be involved in that too. Of course, board members are volunteers, but they're an important part of our organization, and they'll volunteer. And these folks will create, from the individual goals, they'll create action steps. They'll have to make requests for resources in each of the annual budgets that are created, and they'll have to implement the action steps. There's a lot of work. So one of the things that I'll want to see happen is that the strategic plan is very focused. I think that this past time they really took on a lot of work when they had 7 different strategies. And I think at the time it probably was necessary because it was their first time going through that big process. We're hoping to bring our strategies or our goals down to, our big goals down to 3 or 4. And from all of those, we kind of think of that as nesting dolls. So the strategic plan is the big nesting doll. And from each of those, you just keep focusing your work, and everything that you do everything that you do connects to the big doll. Everything connects
Right.
to the big strategic plan. They're all interconnected. So you're not siloed. So there's no group working on just one initiative. You're all working on the same things together.
Right.
I think that when you do that, then your plan, instead of just being linear, kind of becomes a matrix. And you get a lot more, excuse the phrase, but bang for the buck. You get a lot
that's
more that
fine.
comes out of the process because you have people working together in related ways on the same initiatives, even though they may be part of a separate committee. So I'm looking for it to be a really rich experience in that way. I'm looking for, I'm hoping that it will guide the work that we do, and at the end of the day, it'll be something that I can move forward with and support and keep alive, and keep on the front burner, even though, as I said, lots of initiatives come our way from the state and federal government, and sometimes push some of the things that, that we're working on, into a place where they get kind of forgotten. I'm hoping that won't happen. I'm hoping that's another thing I'm hoping will come out of it.
Okay.
I'm hoping that we will be able to come up with goals that will allow us to work with initiatives that come from other places like the state.
Exactly. Now, how big of a school system is Saybrook?
We're about 1,400 students.
Okay.
So we're small. We are only one elementary school, which is pre-K through 3.
Okay.
We have one middle school, which is an unusual configuration of grades 4 through 8. Works for us, though. And then we have a high school that's grades 9 through 12.
Right.
So we're relatively small, but then so are a lot of the school districts in this area. And in some ways, that's difficult, but it's also an advantage. I think that students get a lot of individual attention being in a small
Exactly.
district. And it's advantageous because everybody knows each other.
Right.
And we can support each other, I think, in some ways more easily.
Now, I'm gonna throw an assumption out there, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm gonna assume that you're a superintendent of schools that always is not in your office and you're running around the school system, visiting everybody, just sticking your head into each school, saying hello, probably on a daily basis or whenever your schedule allows.
Absolutely. Whenever my schedule allows, I actually carve out time to go to schools, even if I don't have something to do there. Unfortunately, there is a lot of paperwork and a lot of seat time associated with my, for instance, just last week, I spent an entire day interviewing. So I was in an office with 15 other people conducting interviews, and that was from 8 in the morning or prior to 8 in the morning to about 5:30 in the afternoon. So I didn't see anybody from the schools other than the people who were in the interviews. So that is one of the things that I think most superintendents struggle with. You have to have, your career has to focus on so many things, and your job focuses on so many things. So I'm working on things like the budget, which
Right.
takes a lot of time, although I'm not the only person working on that. I'm meeting with other superintendents, trying to get a message out to our state legislators on
Yeah.
something.
Oh, yeah.
Talking to the community, attending events and activities, trying to get into the schools and see teachers and students. I do like to go to all their events. I try to go to concerts and whenever I can, games, and just go in and see fun stuff going on, because that's the stuff that matters.
Oh,
When
yeah.
you get into the classroom, it's
Totally.
so much fun. My favorite place, I will have to tell you, to be is in the pre-K classroom at Goodwin
totally.
Elementary School.
Oh, yeah.
That's a lot of fun. And
Exactly.
that's the stuff that, as somebody who spent her life in education, that's the stuff that kind of feeds me and keeps me going every day.
Exactly. Now, as far as the aspect of just running around, you said you like to run around and go to different sporting events.
I do.
As
Yeah.
far as
Again,
being
that's the fun stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, as far as we mentioned the local legislature, and you meet with your legislatures and talk about stuff going on in the community.
So
I was going to say, with the local legislative session about to begin here in the
February, yep.
in the not near distant future, what would you want to tell your legislators for the upcoming session?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, see?
Well, I'm actually very fortunate. Connecticut Association of Boards of Education has agreed to send one of their lobbyists down to meet with some of our board members.
Okay.
And we're actually going to have that conversation with her. I also am working with my fellow superintendents in the area. And we are going to be having a legislative breakfast and inviting a number of the legislators to come visit with us so we can have these conversations. And
Okay.
we're fortunate because the legislators will make themselves available to us. So there are a couple of events coming up where I'm going to have an opportunity to talk to them. And I think one of the things that is pervasive in education right now is that we have a number of mandates that have come our way since about 2011, 2010. and they're very hard to incorporate into the school day. The number of training opportunities that you only have so many hours in a day. So while money is an important resource, I think if you ask most educators what they wanted more of right now, they would say time.
Right.
Because there's a number of training, professional development requirements that have really begun to outstrip our ability to actually make them happen and to be faithful to them.
Now, you said you work with all the different superintendents around the shoreline, and like you and I talked off camera, you and I have a mutual friend in common. That would be our friend Jack Cross from the town of Clinton. How is it to work with Jack?
Oh, I'm going to say fantastic no matter what, right?
Of course you are.
Jack's a great guy. He actually is the president of the Middlesex Superintendent's Group. He's the chair of that group. And so he runs the meetings and helps us organize some of our efforts to get hold of legislators, to bring some training in for ourselves, because superintendents still need training too. So he's a terrific guy.
He is. Now, what is the Middlesex County Superintendents Association?
It's actually an arm of CAPS, which is the Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents, and they have all these regional groups so that superintendents have opportunities to meet with other superintendents. Otherwise, it becomes kind of a lonely job. So Jack runs those meetings, and we get together once a month, and we talk about hot topic things that are of concern. We help each other out with situations, give each other advice, bring in training, as I said. Sometimes bring in people from the State Department who can help answer some questions. And so that is a really good support network for superintendents. We can't often get to Hartford to get to big meetings.
No, of course
so
not.
this is a great way to do that. And we get together sometimes also with our colleagues over on the eastern part of the state too, get involved.
Really?
So that's always, those are always great experiences.
Exactly. Now, what else would you like to tell our viewers and our listeners about the Old Saybrook Public School System?
Old Saybrook Public School System. Well, first of all, I've worked in a number of public schools.
Yeah.
Old Saybrook is a terrific place, great community, very supportive of us. We have fabulous teachers, great kids. I just was with a teacher today, actually a first-year teacher. I was in her classroom observing her class, and I said, "Do you like it here?" And she said, "This place is unique." She said, "The kids are awesome, the community is great." And she said what everybody seems to say every time I talk to them about this: we're trying to find a way to move to Old Saybrook. So I think that's about the best compliment a community can get, is when you have people saying we're trying to find a way to move here.
Right. We want to move to Saybrook because the school systems are great.
That's what she said, but I think she also thought the community was great too, and she did mention the school system specifically. And to have one of your teachers feel that way, that's pretty good stuff. And
Exactly. And I've got to tell you, and I was thinking about this last night as I was prepping for today, that you guys in the town of Old Saybrook, I'm gonna give you guys a little bit of credit right now. Your football field.
yeah,
Oh my God.
yeah, you got to see that?
I actually was on the coaching staff for Morgan,
Okay.
and we played Saybrook Thanksgiving
Day.
Thanksgiving
yeah.
morning.
Beautiful day, wasn't it?
Oh, it was great. And it's like stepping on this field. It's like, oh my God!
Yeah.
Somebody, and one of my parents who was with me, was like, "This is a brand new field." I'm
Right.
like, "Really?" He's like,
Truly was about 10
yeah.
games in, not even.
"Yeah." He's
Yeah.
like, "Oh yeah." He's like, "This field is brand new." I'm like, I could get used to this. He's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, it's beautiful.
"It is."
It's beautiful. It was a lot of hard work.
I was
and
going to say,
a long
let's talk.
period of time.
I was going to say, let's talk about the touch on the process. And you said it was a lot of hard work.
Yeah, we ran into a few difficulties with it. We ran into some things that extended the time that it took us to complete it. But the process for doing it was, I think, a fairly typical process. We went out to bid,
Yep.
hired an engineer and a contractor, and they started the process. We just ran into some problems with concern about water drainage, and so that slowed things down
Yep.
considerably. Lost a season. At the end of the day, though, the final product to me looks absolutely beautiful. I'm glad you think so too.
It does.
And of course, Thanksgiving Day was 60 degrees, and if I remember correctly, we had people standing in line to get tickets right through the end of the first quarter. So
I
we were
was
pretty
going
excited.
to say I was on the field
Yeah.
doing my thing, but I remember Thanksgiving Day. It was such a gorgeous day.
It was perfect.
I was actually out there in shorts.
Well, one of the advantages, it was that warm.
Yeah.
I know there were a lot of kids out there
I
running
had
around
shorts
in shorts
on.
and T-shirts. And we had a really good crowd there that day,
Yeah.
and that felt great because those boys, that football team, and those cheerleaders had missed a number of opportunities, and
Oh,
so it
yeah.
was nice to have them out on that field enjoying that beautiful day. The turf field itself is, I know that. For us, it's going to be a real opportunity. There aren't a lot of fields that size in Old Saybrook.
Right.
So there's a lot of demand for that field, and there's an opportunity for us to get more playing time. With a natural grass field, you have to rest it.
Oh, yeah.
There's no rest time on a turf, well, relatively little rest time. You have to do some cleaning and prepping, but other than that, we're able to go from game to game on that field, and that field plays lacrosse, soccer, field hockey, football. And so we're able to put all those teams out there.
Oh, my
As a matter of fact, our first game on that field was a field hockey game.
Was it?
And we won.
All
Just
right.
thought I'd say it.
All right. So within the little bit of more time we have before we say goodnight, what else would you like to tell our viewers and our listeners about either Jan Perruccio, Superintendent of Schools, or the Old Saybrook school system?
The Old Saybrook school system is, there are a couple things that I'd say about it. It is a place that is filled with dedicated and hardworking people. We have a Board of Education that volunteers their time. A lot of people don't understand that. A Board of Education is a volunteer organization. They're elected,
Right.
But there's no pay, and
No.
these folks spend a lot of time, especially during budget season.
Oh, yeah.
If I'm busy during budget season and our Director of Operations, Facilities, and Finance is busy during budget season, the Board of Ed is just as busy with the different committees, Budget and Fiscal, Board of Ed. They're there a lot, and they're to be commended for the hard work that they do. And the same is true of our administrative staff. I mean, these people work 24/7, and that's how you make a good school district.
Exactly.
That's how you make an Old Saybrook.
Exactly. Jan Perruccio from the Old Saybrook school system, I want to thank you for coming down, and hopefully we'll have you on again soon.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks.
You take care.
You too. On behalf of Jan, I'm Peter. Thanks, good night, and we'll see you next week.